Welcome back to the channel, everybody. As you can tell by my shirt, today, we're going to be talking about Pokemon. Now, Pokemon is a series known for many things. A banger of a theme song, good movies, for the most part, whatever your favorite Pokemon is, Ash's hot mom, or the first generation you played of Pokemon. However, one thing that probably doesn't come to mind when you think of Pokemon is the timeline. Now, Nintendo is no stranger whatsoever to games with bizarre and somewhat nonsensical timelines. Zelda. But most people either don't think about the Pokemon timeline or assume it to be very straightforward like most games are. Pokemon has timeline splits, ultra wormholes, and far more bizarre things happen, and if it sounds confusing, don't worry, it'll only get more so. But let's get into the Pokemon timeline. The first stop on our journey through the Pokemon timeline today will be at the beginning of everything. At first, there was nothing, and then there was Egg. And from Egg came God, aka Arceus. I'm gonna say Arceus, because that's how it is now officially pronounced by the Pokemon Company. I don't care what you say. So, you're God. You've just hatched from an egg. What's your first decision? You're gonna make 3 kids. You're gonna make Dialga, the time baby. You're gonna make Palkia, the space baby. And you're gonna make Dialga. Nope. And you're gonna make Giratina, the antimatter baby. But for some reason, Arceus is upset that the child he made to be the embodiment of antimatter and chaos started to act like the embodiment of antimatter and chaos, and so Arceus decided to put him in a permanent timeout in the Shadow Realm. However, then, God's 2 favorite children get to go on to create the universe as we know it. They decide to leave a gateway on Earth. That gateway is now known as the Ancient Spear Pillar in Pokemon. This is one of, if not the first canonical structure. Arceus starts getting upset and lonely that his 2 kids are in a nap because he forced them to create the universe, and then he sent his other child to the Shadow Realm, and since he's feeling lonely, he decides to do what any reasonable person would do. He makes 3 more kids. These kids, which later will become known as the Lake Spirits, I don't know the correct pronunciations of their names, please don't hate me. In the 3 new kids department, we've got Uxie, whatever this one is, the embodiment of knowledge. We got Mesprit, the embodiment of emotion. And we have Azelf, the embodiment of willpower. The aspects that these 3 embody are imparted onto every living creature from this point forward. Back when the Pokemon Earth was just a ball of dirt, water, and gas, we hear about the creation of Groudon, Kyogre, and Rayquaza. Groudon is formed deep within the pressure of the trenches. Kyogre is born of the turbulent sea, and Rayquaza is born from the sky. Now, at the start of this, the ground sibling and sea sibling get into a really big argument with each other, and their older brother Rayquaza has to come over and break it up. This will not be the last time this happens. But this battle that Rayquaza had to halt is exactly what gave birth to the land masses, seas, and lakes as we know them today in Pokemon's geography. Also, not long after this whole fight happens, all the Regis get made deep in the earth as well. Now, fast forward to the Dinosaur Age, or Fossil Pokemon Age? I'm not quite sure what to call it. Also, I don't think it has an official name for this point in the timeline. I could be wrong, but... Now, anyways, in this dinosaur-esque period of the Pokemon world, we get Pokemon like Omastar, Kabutops, Aerodactyl, the Galar fossils pre-Dr. Frankenstein-esque surgery, as well as the original form of the Dreepy line, where we see them reincarnated as ghosts in the modern games, and their Pokédex entries explicitly refer to how they used to be a non-ghost different species from an ancient time, making this a very unique fossil Pokemon, even though it's not really a fossil Pokemon. Well, anyways, during this time, all these prehistory Pokemon were walking around. There was also Genesect, who we will eventually hear from again later. Anyway, nothing happens in all that dinosaur shenanigans, just like in the real world. So we're gonna fast forward to about a million years before Generation 1. That is when the meteor that fell to Paldea and created Area 0, that's when that fell down to Earth and happened. Now, we also have another gap of time for a while, and we're going to go from a million years in the past to instead 20,000 years in the past. So, 20,000 years ago, we have Eternatus falling from a meteor, again, into Galar, and then kind of being in a slumber there for a minute. Okay. 3,000-ish years prehistory to the Pokemon games is when this happens. There's a device revealed to us in X and Y called the Ultimate Weapon. I know, very original, not to be confused with the Ultima Weapon. Now, it is told to us and shown to us that the Ultimate Weapon was, true to its name, a very, very powerful device. In fact, when the weapon was activated, it was so powerful that it split reality and created two versions of the world. The world in which it did not go off, which is our normal world, the ones we're used to for the first few generations, and then the Mega Evolution world, which we find out is games like X and Y, Omega Ruby, and Alpha Sapphire. So here's when the timeline splits. And here's also where the first little bit of headcanon is gonna have to come in, because we don't have official answers. However, after trolling through wikis and in-game descriptions, cutscenes, and more, I'm pretty confident in where I've placed everything. But also, if you pay attention to the timeline, you can see that the event that allows for both Dynamaxing and Terastallization has already happened before the split. This means these mechanics exist in both timelines, and only Mega Evolution seems to be the exclusive one so far. So it is really interesting to think about it would be possible for Ash to Gigantamax as Pikachu, or have a Terra Water Charizard. And overall, when it comes to this timeline split, I feel most events in the prehistory probably happen roughly the same between the two, so unless otherwise specified, the events will be happening in both timelines pretty much the same, because they're mirrors of each other. So, a little while after the weapon's activation, we also have the events of the Darkest Day, where Zacian and Zamazenta came in and kicked Eternatus' ass, putting him back in a coma for a while. So, for these timelines, I'm going to refer to the one with Mega Evolution as Timeline B, and the one without as Timeline A. I don't know why I said that backwards. So first, we're going to visit Timeline B here for a second. Around 2,000 years prior to where the games take place, in Timeline B, a meteor shower falls and hits Earth. This meteor hitting the ground actually is what creates a place called Meteor Falls. Creative name, I know. This same meteor shower is what gave Groudon and Kyogre the ability to turn into their primal forms. Now, back in both timelines, around 1,500-ish years before the games is when language is developed, written language, in the Pokemon world, which seems insanely late. Humans, like real-life humans, have had written language for far longer than 1,000 years. Well, I guess technically this writing system is the one they currently use, so there could be a more ancient writing system, but from what I remember and what I've seen, pretty much all ancient language in the Pokemon past was done by pictograms. So I can believe it. And also they specifically say we don't know if the writing system was inspired by unknown. Don't know how to feel about that. Rayquaza has to step in yet again and stop its primal siblings from fighting, and in order to do so, is so angry it undergoes reality's first Mega Evolution. Doesn't even need the stone or nothing. Now, moving back up to around 700-ish to 300-ish years ago, we have the Pokeball being invented, as well as the Diamond and Pearl clans settling in Hisui. And also, within this 400-year time span is when the events of Legends Arceus happens. Now, Legends Arceus is the first game in the timeline, but not to come out in the series. So around 500 years ago in Timeline B is when we have the guardian deities from Alola stopping a lion and a bat that popped out of a space wormhole. But for some reason, they all end up becoming friends, and the lion and the bat make a bunch of babies to give to the guardians? Sun and Moon were weird. Now, about 150 years before the events of the games in both timelines, we have Brass Tower burning to the ground, killing a few Pokemon, resulting in Ho-Oh coming and raising them into the legendary beasts, our good 3 doggo boys. And now, finally, we have made it to Generation 1. From now on, I'm only going to be talking about one timeline at a time. Timeline A starts with the classics of Red, Blue, and Yellow. Even though Gen 1 may not be the first thing in the timeline, it is still the thing that started it all. A young child meets a kind old man who gives him one of a variety of cute endangered animals, in this case either a water squirrel, a very hot lizard, or a frog. And if you're feeling frisky, you might get an electric mouse. So, from here on out, you're literally tasked to complete his research? This dude literally pawned off his research on a kid. Props to him. Now, on top of doing the Pokedex, you also have to collect gym badges from the other animal fighting rings across the country. Also, maybe you'll take down a criminal syndicate while you're at it. Now, Gen 1 has happened. You might be expecting me to move on to Gen 2. But no, that's not gonna happen. Because guess what's happening at the exact same time as Generation 1? That's right, it's Generation 3. Yeah, for some bizarre reason, and this has been directly stated multiple times, Generations 1 and 3 are happening at almost exactly the same time, but just across the 2 different regions. While Red, Blue, and Yellow are trying to stop Team Rocket, in the next region over, Brendan and May are stopping gods from fighting. So, at the first slot in the game's entry of our timeline, we have all of Gen 1 and all of Gen 2. Let's go to the next stop. Generation 2, we finally made it. Taking place 3 years after Generations 1 and 3, we get Generation 2's Ethan, Chris, and Lyra starting off on their adventures. And guess what? This is also happening concurrently with another Pokemon game. Generation 2 takes place at about the exact same time as Generation 4. So, Gold, Silver, and Crystal are happening alongside Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. We literally have all of Gens 1 and 3 happen at the same time. Then 3 years go by, and we have all of Gens 2 and 4. That's a lot of shit. That's a lot of shit to happen, and a lot of things to be stopped by children in the span of about 5 years in total. Just a few years later, we get the events of Generation 5, Black and White, quickly followed by Black and White 2. Hilda and Herbert travel with their friends around Unova to collect Pokemon and badges, as always. And they also have to stop someone from taking control of all Pokemon or something. I don't know. Black and White 2 take place, funnily enough, 2 years after the events of Black and White. We have upgraded, folks. Introducing Pokemon, now with domestic terrorism, forced Pokemon fusion, DNA manipulation, and Pokemon disguising themselves as actual people, real humans. So, wild enough. However, I know that is the end of the current Timeline A. Now, not the end of time, the world didn't end, but what has happened is we haven't had any more games release in the A timeline. Now, to start off with B, it's going to be a little bit weird. So we have black and white here. Confirmed to be happening at the exact same time as black and white, but in an alternate reality, aka the mega timeline, is X and Y. So we know for a fact that X and Y happens the same time as black and white, meaning that it's this middle point of the timeline here. So what happens before all that? Well, I'll tell you. I believe this is where the remakes fit in. Again, this small bit is headcanon. However, I think it holds up. So the reason I believe the remakes to be in Timeline B is from Mega Evolution and things we will go on to see. The Pokemon universe seems to be more technologically advanced in the Mega Evolution timeline. I believe that the remakes are what fill in from Legends Arceus all the way to X and Y. So now we have this chunk of the timeline filled in, and we know that these events are essentially mirrored. There are some things that differ between the remakes and the originals, however, that's to be expected from an altered timeline. So now, what happens after X and Y? Because we know what happens at the end of the main timeline, Timeline A. So what's the continuation in Timeline B? I'm going to stick the Let's Go games right after Fire Red and Leaf Green, as well as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, because I don't know where the fuck else they would go. So now, let's take a trip to the Alola region. Coming in after X and Y, we have Sun and Moon / Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, which, these games threw me for a loop a little bit, because Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are kind of like 1.5s of the original Sun and Moon, where they follow a lot of the same beats and cover a lot of similar things, but different. So, in Alola, we get more Mega Evolutions, we get Z moves, and these games would also mark the last appearance of Mega Evolution in Pokemon until the inevitable X and Y remakes that come out in 2043. Even though there are no more Mega Evolutions, that does not mean we are done with this timeline at all. So, after the events of Sun and Moon, we get the events of Sword and Shield, which all takes place in Galar, that place from a while ago where Eternatus fell. So, even though Dynamaxing has the potential to exist in both realities, or we know it does in both realities, it is the awakening and triggering of Eternatus that seems to be releasing all this Dynamax energy. So, Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, followed by Sword and Shield, and then subsequently followed by its DLC. Although, I can't imagine that takes place more than a month or two after the main game's canonical events. And now up to the modern day of Pokemon with the most recent releases of Scarlet and Violet. Now, at the filming of this video, we have not had the DLC release, so I guess there's the potential for that to reveal something and completely ruin something else I put in this video. However, barring that, I'm putting Scarlet and Violet at the most recent point in the timeline in Timeline B. The fact that the player character is most likely from Galar makes me believe that the connection to Sword and Shield is pretty firm in this one. So again, even though we know for a fact that because of the other meteor that fell to Earth, but this time the one with the crystals in it, because that one fell to Earth, terrestrialization has the potential to exist in both timelines, and it is my personal belief that terrestrialization definitely also exists in Timeline A, we just have not seen it yet. That is because the same event happened in both timelines. One of the first things to ever happen in Pokemon was the thing that spawned this event. What leads to it is the natives in that region researching the crystals from this meteor and discovering terrestrialization. That has nothing to do with any other external event, so it seems very logical to me that those would take place in both timelines. Or at least the event of the discovery of terrestrialization most likely exists in both timelines A and B. However, Scarlet and Violet also provide their own problems, as we all know, in the form of the Paradox Pokemon. I mean, Paradox is in the name. Hear me out. Put on your tinfoil hats, I'm about to go full-on Pokemon conspiracy theory mode on you. Okay? So we know about the Ultra Wormholes from Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, the things that brought us things like Solego and Lunala and the other Ultra Beasts. And we know that some of the Ultra Beasts are considered starters on their planet for young trainers, presumably. Because of this, it is my belief that the Paradox Pokemon being pulled through these gaps in time aren't directly coming from the future or past of that time they're playing. Anyway, take a look at it. This is what I think is the definitive Pokemon timeline. All the way from Egg to Scarlet and Violet. It's what I think it is. At least for now, this timeline has one less branch than Zelda, which is a win for me. However, that will change whenever I decide to bring in things like the side games into this project. So subscribe to see that future video tackling the spin-off games in the timeline. But until then, like, subscribe, check out my other videos, and I'll see you next time.